You are not anxious because the economy is unstable. You are anxious because your nervous system evolved for scarcity and the system discovered how to simulate it permanently. Modern macroeconomics does not operate on rational agents. It operates on primates carrying Stone Age threat detectors inside digitized credit architectures. The numbers are real, the reactions are ancient, the profits emerge from the mismatch. Between 2021 and 2026, the United States did not merely expand its money supply, it rewired how danger feels. M2 surged, then plateaued at a historically elevated level, while real wages stalled near statistical zero. On paper, collapse never arrived. In the body, it never left. This is the first asymmetry. Liquidity moves faster than labor, money is injected instantly, wages renegotiate slowly, prices adjust immediately. Paychecks follow later, if at all. The gap between injection and compensation is where stress is harvested. Humans interpret price increases as threat signals. Prices adjust immediately. Our ICEs adjust immediately. Food and energy activate loss aversion, the tendency to feel losses more intensely than gains. 5% raise feels irrelevant when groceries rise 8%. The nervous system does not average inflation, it tracks erosion. Who benefits from that erosion? The issuer of currency and the holders of assets denominated in it. When new money enters the system, it does not distribute evenly. It flows first through financial channels, bidding up assets, stabilizing balance sheets, and only later leaking into wages. By the time labor receives it, purchasing power has already decayed. This is not theft in the moral sense, it is transfer through timing. Timing is invisible to people who only see year-over-year charts. Inflation functions as behavioral taxation. It extracts compliance without legislation. No vote is required to reduce the real value of savings. No announcement is necessary to increase the urgency to spend. When money decays, hoarding feels dangerous. Consumption feels like protection. That instinct predates currency. In unstable environments, stored resources rot or attract predators, spend or perish. The system resurrects that logic with interest rates below inflation. When real rates turn negative, saving becomes self-punishment. Debt becomes anesthetic. Credit card balances did not rise because consumers became reckless. They rose because time preference shifted. When future purchasing power feels unreliable, the rational response is to pull value forward. The Bank for International Settlements documents this behavior clinically. Households borrow to preserve a constant lifestyle, not to expand it. The emotional result is paradoxical. Employment remains high, GDP grows, yet people report exhaustion, stagnation, and quiet panic. This is learned helplessness emerging at scale. Effort no longer correlates cleanly with security. When output rises but stability does not, the brain stops expecting reward. Authority bias seals the loop. Official inflation prints report moderation. Wage trackers show modest gains. Central banks reassure the body disagrees. When lived experience diverges from sanctioned data, individuals assume personal failure. They internalize systemic outcomes. This is the second asymmetry. Perception lags reality, and authority manages perception. Statistical adjustments smooth volatility, but they also flatten pain. Substitution bias assumes consumers adapt seamlessly to reduced standards. Hedonic adjustments treat quality changes as compensation for price increases. Owner's equivalent rent converts actual housing costs into hypothetical estimates. Each method is defensible in isolation. Together, they dampen alarm. Reduced alarm preserves confidence. Confidence preserves spending. Spending sustains nominal growth. Nominal growth stabilizes debt ratios. The beneficiary is the debtor with scale. Government debt now requires continuous refinancing. Interest expense approaches levels historically reserved for war. The system cannot tolerate genuine price stability. 2% inflation is not a target, it is a minimum lubricant. Below it, debt hardens. This creates a structural dependency on mild debasement, not enough to trigger revolt, enough to erode. The public experiences this as a permanent sense of falling behind. That sensation drives compliance. Workers accept longer hours. Consumers accept leverage. Investors accept risk compression. Status anxiety amplifies the effect. Asset inflation rewards those already inside. Housing, equities, and alternative assets reprice faster than wages. Relative position becomes unstable. People measure survival socially, not absolutely. Falling behind peers registers as existential threat. Dopamine completes the mechanism. Short-term rewards replace long-term planning. Promotions, side hustles, speculative assets, consumption rituals. Each provides a brief signal of progress in an environment where structural advancement is constrained. Platforms monetize this cycle. Financial products multiply around it. At no point is coercion required. The system does not need you to understand it. It needs you to feel it. The deeper trap emerges when individuals attempt to solve systemic pressure with personal optimization, budgeting harder, working more, risking further. These responses increase throughput without altering extraction. They stabilize the machine. Risk is transferred upward while risk perception is pushed downward. Households carry variable costs. Institutions carry fixed advantages. When volatility rises, those closest to liquidity absorb it last. By 2026, multiple refinancing walls converge. Sovereign debt, commercial real estate, leveraged firms. Each depends on conditions that no longer exist. Resolution requires either higher inflation or visible defaults. One preserves appearances, the other clarifies reality. The system prefers opacity. You are not confused because the economy is complex, risking further. Anxiety keeps you engaged. Hope keeps you compliant. Neither requires accuracy. This is not dysfunction. It is design operating within biological constraints. You are watching an ancient nervous system interface with a modern balance sheet. Now you see why it works. The next illusion is effort, specifically the belief that increased effort restores equilibrium. In ancestral environments, effort scaled survival. More hunting increased calories, more vigilance reduced predation. The feedback loop was tight. Energy in produce, safety out. Modern macro systems sever that loop while preserving its sensation. From 2021 onward, productivity rose unevenly. Output per worker recovered faster than real compensation. The data shows it plainly. Yet individuals responded by working longer hours, stacking credentials, and monetizing every idle minute. This was not ambition, it was threat response. When systems inflate faster than wages, effort becomes a treadmill. The organism increases output, but the ground moves beneath it. This generates a specific psychological state, chronic urgency without resolution. Who benefits from that state? Systems that require continuous participation but cannot promise proportional reward. Macroeconomic expansion creates nominal growth. Nominal growth preserves the appearance of progress. Humans evolved to track relative motion, not absolute truth. As long as numbers rise, stagnation feels like personal failure rather than structural extraction. This is where authority bias re-enters. Central banks speak in aggregates, governments report averages, the individual experiences variance. When averages improve but personal conditions do not, the brain assumes it is the outlier. Outliers self-correct, systems remain intact. Inflation reframes time, future money becomes suspect, long-term planning erodes, retirement narratives collapse into probability clouds. This induces a compression of horizon. Humans narrow their planning window under uncertainty. The result is short-termism. Short-termism is profitable. It increases transaction volume. It increases leverage tolerance. It reduces resistance to unfavorable terms. Contracts shorten. Attention fragments. Optionality shifts upward. The behavioral term is present bias, the preference for immediate rewards over future ones, amplified when the future feels unstable. Inflation accelerates present bias without ever naming it. Prices rise, rates lag, the future shrinks. This is why asset volatility feels addictive. In uncertain systems, intermittent rewards outperform stable ones in conditioning behavior. Dopamine spikes occur not from gains, but from resolution of uncertainty. Markets provide endless resolution. The individual chases relief, not wealth. Debt slots perfectly into this structure. It converts future labor into present relief. When real rates are suppressed, debt feels rational. When wages lag, debt feels necessary. The line between optimization and survival blurs. This is not irresponsibility, it is adaptation. The system benefits because debt fixes behavior in place. Indebted agents cannot exit, they cannot slow down. They cannot tolerate volatility that threatens cash flow, they become predictable. Predictability is valuable. At the sovereign level, predictability stabilizes tax receipts and consumption. At the corporate level, it stabilizes revenue. At the financial level, it stabilizes collateral values. Every layer upstream relies on downstream agents remaining engaged. They cannot slow down, it does not manifest as despair, it manifests as compliance. People stop asking whether the system works, they ask how to survive inside it. This is the quietest trap. Risk perception is managed through abstraction, numbers are large, timeframes are long, responsibility diffuses. Meanwhile, risk is transferred downward through variable pricing, floating rates, and flexible labor arrangements. Stability concentrates upward. When stress rises, individuals seek narratives, media provides them, political cycles provide them, culture wars provide them. These narratives externalize blame without threatening structure, they consume attention, they exhaust scrutiny. The system does not require deception. It requires distraction. As fiscal pressures mount, the need for growth intensifies. Growth can come from productivity or pricing. Productivity is slow, pricing is immediate. Inflation becomes policy by default. Inflation also fragments collective response. Each household experiences it differently. Renters suffer differently than owners. Debtors differently than savers. Fragmentation prevents alignment. Misalignment prevents resistance. This is why inflation is favored over taxation. Taxes unify opposition. Inflation atomizes it. The result is a population that feels individually cornered but collectively disorganized. Anxiety becomes private. Solutions become personal. The system remains unchallenged. By the time refinancing walls appear, the public has been conditioned to expect intervention. Intervention preserves nominal values. Nominal preservation masks real losses. Loss aversion is satisfied superficially. This is why crashes are softened, but stagnation persists. You are not exhausted because you lack discipline. You are exhausted because the feedback loop between effort and security has been intentionally loosened. You are not confused because data is complex. You are confused because clarity would collapse participation. The system converts ancient instincts into modern throughput. Nothing requires conspiracy. Hope becomes leverage, and why it never was. Accidental. Nothing required exhcon, a USPSITED because the ACY. It is INTENTION, ASINI LLLY, aus element operating on biology. Loose-sundered understanding does not free you, it removes illusion. Now you understand why the trap feels personal and why it never was. The next illusion is choice. Modern economic systems present participation as voluntary. You choose where to work, you choose what to buy. You choose how to invest, the menu is wide, the constraints are invisible. Choice overload masks coercion. When options multiply without altering outcomes, the organism experiences agency without power. This is more stabilizing than force. Force generates resistance. Simulated choice generates self-blame. From a macro perspective, labor flexibility is praised. From a biological perspective, instability triggers vigilance. Short contracts, variable hours, algorithmic scheduling, and performance metrics keep the nervous system alert. Alert organisms do not disengage, they adapt. Who benefits from permanent alertness? Systems that monetize attention, speed, and compliance. Scarcity response plays a central role here. Scarcity is not defined by absolute shortage, but by perceived access. Abundance, access choice. A adshink generates, the BRAI emblemen enters hoarding mode. This mode narrows cognition, it reduces long-term reasoning. It increases obedience to authority. Wage stagnation alongside rising asset prices creates artificial scarcity of status. Status is not luxury, it is safety signaling. In primate hierarchies, status predicts resource access. Falling status triggers risk-taking. Rising status triggers conservation. The system inflates assets faster than labor. This rewards those already positioned and pressures those outside to chase entry. Entry costs rise. Leverage fills the gap. Leverage increases fragility. Fragility increases compliance. This is a closed loop. Authority bias stabilizes it. When central institutions frame conditions as a normalization or soft landings, dissent sounds ignorant. Technical language acts as social armor. The public defers to expertise even when lived experience contradicts it. Deference is not stupidity, it is an evolved heuristic. In uncertain environments, following perceived leaders conserves energy. The problem arises when leaders optimize for system stability rather than participant well-being. Inflation targeting illustrates this perfectly. 2% sounds benign, it is presented as neutral. In practice, it encodes a preference for debtors over savers, scale over labor, and continuity over correction. Why does the public accept it? Because the cost is distributed temporally and psychologically. Loss aversion reacts strongly to sudden shocks. Gradual erosion bypasses alarm thresholds. This is the boiling frog problem without the metaphor. Risk is not eliminated, it is delayed and displaced. Commercial real estate distress, zombie firms, and sovereign refinancing walls are not anomalies. They are deferred consequences. The system extends itself by pulling risk forward into balance sheets while pushing pain backward into households. When defaults are postponed, costs accrue silently, temporary measures become permanent tools, capital stagnates, growth becomes cosmetic. The organism senses rot without seeing collapse. This produces chronic unease. Unease sustains engagement. People keep watching, they keep working, they keep consuming, they wait for resolution. Resolution is rare because resolution would require admitting mispricing. Mispricing would force repricing. Repricing would redistribute losses upward. Upward redistribution is resisted. Instead misallocates, narratives rotate, crisis becomes cycle, emergency becomes baseline, temporary measures become permanent tools. Learned helplessness deepens, not because people stop caring, but because caring fails to change outcomes. At that stage, individuals do not rebel. They optimize locally, they trade meaning for manageability. The system benefits from localized optimization, it fragments coordination, each person solves for their own survival, collective leverage dissolves. Even anger is captured, anger is redirected horizontally, generational blame, cultural blame, political blame, vertical scrutiny fades. This is not accidental, it is structurally emergent. By 2026, data integrity itself becomes unstable. Shutdowns, imputation, revisions. When measurement degrades, accountability follows. You cannot contest what you cannot verify. Uncertainty favors incumbents. Meanwhile, fiscal expansion continues. Deficits widen, tariffs rise, interest expense accelerates. These are not secrets, they are disclosed plainly. Yet their behavioral implications remain unspoken. Inflation as behavioral taxation continues because it works. It funds the state, it props markets, it disciplines labor, it avoids revolt. The human weakness exploited here is not greed, it is pattern recognition under uncertainty. The brain seeks continuity. It accepts gradual harm over sudden disruption. Who benefits? Those positioned to absorb volatility and arbitrage time. By the time individuals recognize the pattern, they are embedded within it. Exit costs are high, alternatives feel risky. Familiar pain becomes preferable to unknown change. This is the final tightening of the trap. There is no villain in the narrative sense. There is incentive geometry interacting with evolved cognition. Systems do not need intent to exploit. They only need to persist. You are not trapped because you fail to see. You are trapped because seeing comes after participation. Now you understand why clarity arrives late, and why the system remains calm while you do not. The final illusion is inevitability. Once a system operates long enough, its outputs begin to feel like natural law. Prices rise, debt grows, work intensifies. Insecurity persists. These conditions are no longer questioned as design. They are accepted as environment. This is the most efficient stage of control. When humans believe a structure is inevitable, they stop testing alternatives, they conserve energy. They adapt behaviorally rather than strategically. The organism shifts from problem-solving to endurance. Macroeconomic systems exploit this by embedding volatility into baseline conditions. Inflation fluctuates but never resolves. Rates rise but never normalize. Employment holds but security decays. Each variable oscillates within a band that maintains stress without triggering rupture. This is not equilibrium, it is managed instability. Managed instability keeps risk asymmetric. Large actors hedge, small actors absorb, institutions refinance. Households roll balances. The system survives by converting fragility into flow. At this stage, fear is no longer acute. It becomes ambient, background radiation, a constant low-grade signal that something is wrong but unidentifiable. This is psychologically optimal for extraction. Acute fear disrupts, chronic fear sustains. The brain responds by narrowing identity. People define themselves through roles that feel controllable, job titles, income brackets, consumption patterns. These identities are then measured, compared, and ranked. Status anxiety deepens. Status anxiety is not vanity. It is an evolved proxy for survival probability. Falling status predicts exclusion. Exclusion predicts death. Modern systems simulate exclusion through economic precarity rather than physical banishment. The threat feels real because it is real. Asset inflation magnifies this. When housing, education, healthcare, and financial assets rise faster than wages, access becomes conditional on leverage. Leverage ties individuals to future labor. Future labor is uncertain. Uncertainty increases submission. This is the quiet conversion of freedom into obligation. Authority bias now shifts from institutions to numbers themselves. Charts replace judgment. Models replace experience. Forecasts replace memory. When outcomes disappoint, blame is assigned to insufficient optimization rather than flawed premises. This sustains participation even as returns diminish. At the sovereign level, inevitability is reinforced through scale. Debt figures are so large they defy intuition. Trillions become abstract. Abstract threats do not mobilize response, they induce paralysis. Paralysis is profitable, it freezes alternatives. The refinancing walls approaching in the mid-2020s are framed as technical challenges, rollovers, term premiums, liquidity facilities. Language anesthetizes consequence, the public hears continuity, the system hears survival. When intervention arrives, it will be framed as necessity, not choice. Necessity dissolves accountability, losses are socialized quietly. Gains remain privatized historically. This pattern is not new, it is simply larger. The human weakness exploited here is not ignorance, it is trust in continuity. Humans evolved in environments where systems were small and failures were visible. Modern systems are vast and opaque, failures are diffused. Diffusion prevents learning. Learned helplessness completes the cycle. When repeated stressors occur without clear resolution, organisms stop attempting escape. They focus on minimizing pain within constraints. This is adaptive in captivity. It is disastrous in systems that present captivity as freedom. By now, most participants no longer ask who benefits, they ask how to cope. Coping sustains the system, diagnosis threatens it. This channel exists in the narrow space before acceptance hardens. There is no call to action because action implies agency. Agency has already been traded for predictability. There is no reassurance because reassurance would replicate the mechanism. There is only understanding. You now see how financial systems exploit ancient instincts. Loss aversion keeps you working harder for less. Scarcity response keeps you consuming under pressure. Authority bias keeps you deferring judgment. Dopamine loops keep you engaged. Learned helplessness keeps you compliant. And you see who benefits, scale benefits, liquidity benefits, those who control timing benefit. The system does not hate you, it does not care about you, it converts behavior into stability, it converts stability into power. You were never meant to feel secure inside it, you were meant to function. Now you see the system, and you understand why it works.